Hey y'all, Grandma Rose here. Hey guys. It doesn't matter whether you say hey y'all or hey guys, it means the same thing. So, this is the first time I have recorded an intro for myself. Figured it was probably, even though I have recorded a lot of things around the garden, working out this spring and digging and doing a lot of other things around the garden, I haven't introduced myself and thought, well, maybe before I put up any of those other videos, I should put up a video about me so you'll know who I am when you see me out planting things and out working with the chickens and out whatever doing in the garden or whatever I'm doing around my property. You'll know who I am. I'm Grandma Rose. I'm Ginger Rose. On Facebook, I am Ginger Rose. And hello, kitty kitty. On Facebook, I'm Ginger Rose, and on Instagram, I'm also Grandma Rose's Homestead. I have another channel that I've had there for a while, and if you may have found me there too, and that's okay. You can follow me two places, but please follow me. I would appreciate it. I think it's kind of fun. It's nice to know that there's people around who enjoy listening to what I have to say, or at least think they might want to listen to what I have to say. Anyway, so I'm going to go on. In the past, last year, I guess sometime, there was a collaboration going on where people were asked to tell 30 things about themselves. And I got to thinking when I was listening to that that's probably what I should do when I get around to introducing myself. So here's 30 things about me. And I will try not to go in any kind of big detail that would be possible. If I did that, it would take an hour, and I don't want to take an hour on this. So I will touch on these a little bit and then come back at a later date, and we'll do videos about some of the ones that take longer to talk about. I think that would be kind of fun. This kitty behind me back here, her name is Max. She was named after the cartoon character Max because she's grumpy. She's a grumpy old woman. And she wasn't a grumpy old woman at the time when I got her, but she was still grumpy. So she's Max. She's Maxine. So number one on my list of 30 things about me, and you probably already guessed this, I'm a baby boomer. My parents were born in the 1920s. My dad served in World War II. My mother was actually a driver on the Millington Naval Air Base while he served in the military. And so I was born when he came back from the military. When I was in college, I actually saw posters for Woodstock. Didn't go to Woodstock. And at the time, I really didn't know what it was all about because I wasn't really kind of into the hippie thing at the time. I was more of a preppy girl than the hippie. I married at 18 after my freshman year. I had a son soon after, and after that I went to work and helped put my husband through law school. So the third thing about me is I have 2 children and I have 4 grandchildren. Now, my grandchildren could be babies, but they're not. My youngest grandchild started college this past fall. My oldest grandchild works in Orlando. He is an entertainer with Disney World and Universal Studios. He's doing pretty well. I'm really, really proud of him. Number 4, you can see from all the yarn, which way, this is backwards, behind me, that I kind of have a passion for yarn. I taught myself to knit when I was 8 years old. Someone gave me one of those teach yourself to knit kits. I was in the 3rd grade and I was 8 years old, and I taught myself to knit by looking at the pictures. Hello, Max. By looking at the pictures, and my mom didn't know I was doing it, I don't think, because she didn't help me, and she knew how to knit. So I think it was a surprise to her when she found out that I had taught myself. Number 5 is I love to read. I've read since I can remember learning how to read. And when I was a child, Mom would take me to the library, and I would get all the books that I could at one time, read them, and she'd have to take me back to get more. The funny thing is, I didn't realize at the time that a child could get adult books. I thought the children's books were for children, and the other general fiction and other books for adults. I didn't know that if I had wanted to, I could have checked out an adult book. Number 6. I was a musician. I played piano, and then when I was in junior high school, which is middle school now, I played the flute in the band, and then I quit band in high school. My brother told me it was geeky. I don't think he told me. The geeky was not the word at the time. Same means the same thing, so I didn't want to be that, so I quit band. And I didn't start my music again until I was in my 20s when I got a guitar. Number 7 is I ran away from home when I was 9. Yep. What happened was, I didn't pack the bag and go anywhere and, get on the bus or try anything like that. But my friend and I picked every single one of the neighbor's tulips. And she came over to my mom's house, and I thought she was coming over to tell Mom what I had done. And my friend and I took off, and we didn't come back until after it was dark. Mom had the police out looking for us. They didn't find us. We hid really well. But we actually saw the police. They had spotlights looking for us. And crazy kids. I think about now what would happen if children did that. It would be terrible. My parents were frantic enough, and that was back in the 50s, because I was in elementary school then. Anyway, I mentioned my dad being in the service, and this is kind of a downer, but it's also, he was he got a medical discharge from the Navy and suffered what would now be called PTSD. At the time, they called it shell shock. But he was a Navy medic and was in an airplane, I guess it was the Navy Air Force at the time, flying over the Gulf of Mexico, and their plane was shot down. So he lost his best friend and several other people who were on board and survived himself, but he suffered badly for it and had a really hard time later on settling down. He couldn't hold a job. He didn't really have a problem getting a job, I don't think. But he went from job to job to job, and consequently we went from house to house to house. In the same town, I can remember from the time I was a young child before school until I graduated from high school, we lived in 11 different houses. Finally, my dad got it together, and he settled into a job that he did very well at. And we bought a house, and we lived in the same house for 5.5 years. Our last name was Rose. I may have mentioned that my maiden name was Rose, and that's why I'm Grandma Rose. Anyway, he decided he was going to be a rose grower. He was a gardener, but instead of growing vegetables, he grew flowers. And he was obsessed with gardening. He had 250 rose bushes. And of course, having that number of flowers, he wasn't the one that had the hobby. We all had the hobby. So when I was in elementary school, I was helping him pruning his rose bushes, and it was crazy. So the crazy thing is, though, he had all these rose bushes, and today, to this date, I still will not grow hybrid tea roses. They're too much work. And they were pampered, and I'm not going to grow anything that has to be pampered. I have a garden. I grow vegetables. I have grown roses, antique roses, climbing roses, things like that. And I've grown a lot of flowers, but not the same kind of roses my dad grew. So I learned how to garden then. I learned all about taking care of plants and what it takes for nutrition, and how to keep them healthy, how to keep them weeded a whole lot. The only time from then on, from the time I was in the 6th grade until now, the only time I can remember not having a garden was when I was in college. So there were about 5 years in there from the time when I was a freshman and I was living married student housing. I didn't have a garden, but every other place I've lived, I have had a garden of some sort, even if it was a balcony garden, living in an apartment. Number 10, I have 5 cats, 2 dogs, and if you count the chicks in the brooder, I've got 15 chicks right now in the brooder, 2 different brooders. I have more than 30 chickens. Number 11, I live on 8 acres. A good piece of land. The people who lived in this house before me had horses, so a lot of it is pasture land, but there are woods surrounding it. So I'd have a wooded acreage, plus I have a good bit of it. I don't know how many acres is arable land, and I'm only actually gardening in the area right around my house. So I guess in permaculture terms, I would be gardening my Zone A area. I intend to move out farther. In fact, I have planted some fruit trees, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes.